Little things to have our imagination think about. But we have to take that imagination and take it from the wild and the petty to the wondrous and the wonderful in order to begin to understand who we already are in the midst of this world. We're all children of God who are immortal creatures. Now, in today's first reading, we see this mysterious figure come out of nowhere, Melchizedek. Abram had received a revelation from God and was following God's command because of that personal revelation. And he has conflict. He defeats 4 kings. And he knows it's a miracle that happened. And he wants to give thanks to God. And suddenly, this mysterious priest appears. A priest of the God Most High, the King of all creation. He came to know something about the divine life through looking at the created life. His imagination had been set free. There were many other gods and goddesses worshipped. He knew they were nothing. There was something greater than that. And he dedicated his life to that God, and he offers grape and grain, bread and wine, in a thanksgiving sacrifice for the victory that Abram had over his enemies. And Abraham, in gratitude, gives 1/10 of the booty to this mysterious priest. And every Catholic priest, when we're ordained according to the order of Melchizedek. There was the order of the Levites within the tribes of Israel who did priestly duties. We're not a part of that priestly line, but this other priestly line that offers grape and grain, bread and wine to the God of all things visible and invisible. Now, as Catholics, when we drive around the countryside, we'll see fields of wheat, and we'll say, that's going to make flour, that's going to make bread. But some of that wheat could be transformed into the very body and blood of Christ, the soul and divinity. Sometimes we'll see a vineyard. Well, that vineyard might make nice grape jelly, might make some wines, but could also be a part of God's divine plan to transform the human soul and human spirit. Like Melchizedek, when we look at the created world and all its wonder around us, our imagination should grow. Our understanding of who we are in the midst of this created world be deepened. Now, in today's second reading, St. Paul is writing to the Corinthians, and he reminds them that right from the beginning, Jesus gave the believing community something very precious at the Last Supper. And he outlines for us exactly what we're doing here today. When Jesus blessed the bread, saying, "Take and eat this bread, it's my body. Take and drink this wine, it's my blood." And throughout the centuries, we have to see believing communities in every nation, every race, every nationality, from the destitute peoples of the world to the wealthy, coming together to participate in this divine feast. We have so often a failure of our imagination to grasp just how wondrous this church is, that by the grace of God we are a part of. Sometimes when we look over the history, our own histories, and our misconceptions about what religion is about, I always bring up the fact that I was preparing for my first communion as a child, and I came home to see my mother one day, and I said, Larry Propri said he's going to be making his first communion too. My mom said, yeah, he's going to be in your first communion class. And I was sort of shocked and started to cry, and I said, he can't receive his first communion. He's not Slovak. My vision of the church was just a little bit too narrow. But no matter how much we study, no matter how many degrees we get in the course of our life, our vision of the church is always just too narrow for what the reality actually is. That's why week after week, month after month, year after year, Our sense of wonder should grow as we look out at the world around us and to realize that we're a part of that world and yet also a part of another world. Jesus in today's gospel, he has the multiplication of the loaves and fish. A miracle indeed. It sort of shook up the apostles. But the miracle that we participate in week after week, month after month, year after year, from the time of our first communion to the last communion we receive before leaving this world, is a greater miracle. We come to the Eucharist, and sometimes we think, oh, this is so boring, and my imagination is on everything else except, what's going on around the altar. I'm thinking about sports playoffs. I'm thinking about where I'll go in the afternoon. I'm worried about work or health or family. And the whole celebration is over before we know it. And sometimes, if we're very young, we think it's going to be an eternity before it's over. But it's preparing us for a different type of eternity. But nevertheless, whatever amount of concentration we have during the Eucharist, something will happen to us. Hopefully for better. And what we consume begins to consume us. And so if we hear the gospel week after week, month after month, year after year, it becomes very hard to neglect our neighbor, family, and friends. It becomes harder and harder to hate and despise our enemies. Our sinfulness and our selfishness begins to be chipped away, and our stony hearts changed into humane human hearts, where we're concerned about our fellow human beings, and at the same time we reverence the creation around us because it's God's first great gift to us. And so this Sunday we're celebrating the body and blood of Christ. Too often, as believers, we take that awesome truth for granted. But I would just invite you today to receive this communion as if it's your first communion, and as the saints would always say, and to receive it as if it's going to be your last communion, because we never know when we will step into the next world and be in total communion with God, the angels, and the saints.